Welcome everybody to the second in our 1350 videos, and this evening we're at the house on the couch, and with me is Brother Jude.
Hello.
This is Brother Jude. He's in mufti, as am I, because we've come off of quite a long week of services and fun things, so we've had a day off, but we thought we'd get this in quick whilst we had chance. So like the last video, I'm going to ask the guest a number of questions, a couple of trick ones, and we'll see how it goes. So I'm going to saddle a little bit so I can look at Jude, because I feel rude talking that way when he's over here. So you might get me side on, I might come out of the frame, but it's not about me, it's about Jude. So there we are. I'll try and stay somewhat in. Jude, tell us about you.
I am a novice monk at the Community of the Resurrection in Mirfield in West Yorkshire. I've been there for just over a year, and I came to visit you for Holy Week to the parish of St Peter's, St Andrews and All Saints. Yeah, and we seemed to get on alright, didn't we? So you invited me back. So I'm here for the 1350th anniversary of St Peter's Church and Monastery, and particularly it was Bede's feast day, wasn't it?
It was
Yesterday.
Indeed. 25th of May, every year.
Every year.
Every year.
He'll be back. Yeah, so that's me, and that's why I'm here.
Why the monastery? What drew you to it?
Good question. I felt a call to the monastic life when I was 17. I was reading some books about mystical prayer, contemplative prayer. I was reading a book by a contemporary American Carmelite monk, and from there I started reading the works of St John of the Cross and St Teresa of Avila. And that really called to me. God really drew my heart to that kind of world. But it was all a bit exotic to me. I thought of monasteries as being Roman Catholic, European, and just a bit sort of distant, even though the guy I was reading was American. But yeah, definitely Roman Catholic and not British, I thought. So I didn't really know what to do with that call, apart from sort of cherish it in my heart and keep reading that kind of material and keep sort of inviting the Holy Spirit to lead me into contemplative prayer. I took a gap year with Youth for Christ and did youth work and schools work, and then I went to university in Durham to study theology, and then I ended up studying theology and music. And while I was there, I got into the student amateur dramatics scene, and I loved it. And I ended up spending most of my time on that, really. And from there, I decided to try to make a career out of it. So that call hadn't gone away, I think, but it went onto the back burner for a while, and I pursued acting, made a career out of it for about 22 years, living in different parts of London, doing lots of different acting jobs, touring around a lot, around the UK, and eventually around the world, and doing all sorts of other little jobs in between, especially working as a teaching assistant in a special needs school. That was my main in-between job. And both those things were really nourishing, the acting and the schoolwork, and they both pointed towards God in their own way. One of them through creativity, art, sharing, storytelling, and the other through caring for people and learning to listen. Well, they're both about learning to listen. But particularly in the special needs schools, it was about learning to listen and watch for subtle communication and unusual communication. And that just makes you pay attention to people. and teaches you to, mixing with people with severe learning difficulties, teaches you to value people in a different way, I think. And it's good for humility. I can't claim a great deal of humility, but probably, hopefully, God willing, slightly more as a result of being in special needs schools than before. It just sort of reframes your ideas of who you are and who other people are and what it means to be a valid human being. And then that monastic call started to come back. Circumstances changed and became more amenable to pursuing that as a real call, and my hunger for that had gradually over the years come back to the fore. So I started looking. By that time I was going to a church that was aware that Anglican monasticism existed, which I just wasn't aware of as a younger person, and I think a lot of Anglicans aren't really aware of. So I knew now that this was a real thing and not just an exotic dream. And so I did a very real and modern and ordinary thing and Googled it. And the first place I came across was the Community of the Resurrection in Mirfield, and there was a lot on that website that really spoke to me. The life of prayer, the music, the academic life. They have a great library, some quite scholarly brothers, a college.
We've switched cameras because the other one broke, so I'm not quite sure where we ended up on the last bit, but we're gonna start. I think you were talking about being humble. So we're gonna jump. You'll see a kind of a cut in the last video, and then we're gonna cut into this one to save Brother Jude, to save him some time, because he's been worked hard this week. So do you want to tell us, you were talking about being in the monastery, no sorry, I haven't got to that bit yet, talking about your calling to the monastery and Googling, yeah, we got to Googling, as all good Googlers do.
Okay. Yeah, so I Googled and I found the Mirfield website, and I think I got to saying that there were lots of things on there that really sort of spoke to me, like the academic life there with the library and the college, and the life of prayer, of course, was the central thing. Beautiful church, and quite a variety of works that the community does as well. Primarily on site, the main work at Mirfield is receiving retreat guests and leading retreats and being available for people to speak to, and for the more experienced brethren giving spiritual direction, and for the priest brethren confession, and of course administering the sacraments in church. And the church life looked really rich. The music seemed quite sort of advanced, I suppose, or well developed. It was a rich musical life, and that really appealed as well. And so I went to visit, and yeah, all of those things were true, and I loved them. And then I found all sorts of other things, like the brethren seem to travel quite a bit. They go abroad visiting other monasteries and going to conferences and things like that. A lot of them speak German because there's a close relationship with a Roman Catholic Benedictine community in Germany, in Trier. And that really appealed to me because I studied German at school and I loved it, and I hadn't really used it much since. And I also loved the fact of that relationship with the Roman Catholic community, and that church unity is very much at the heart of CR. And they have a close friendship with a Benedictine community, a Trappist community, in fact, of sisters in Italy, in Vittorciano. So there's all this sort of bridge building, and with the community in Trier, They even go as far as sharing Eucharist when they visit each other. They will each receive whichever way the visit is going. And Trier made it possible for Murfield to be adopted into their what's it called? I forget what the anyway, their kind of not their order, but the sort of subsection of the order that they are part of. I'm sorry, I forget the proper word. But we are sort of honorary members of that particular Catholic Benedictine province. That might be the word. So yeah, that meant a lot. And I liked the brothers. I liked the people. I liked the place. I liked the situation. It's very pretty. There's lots of countryside. Get to go on lots of walks. Yeah, so I had been intending to visit a couple other places, probably the Franciscans and probably Mucknell Abbey in Worcestershire, but in the end that week I really felt like God was calling me to CR, so I just sort of pursued that.
Great. Well, I asked the last guy, so I ask you.
Yeah.
What is worship in 3 words?
That's a great question.
And I'll tell you what he said.
Attention, adoration, humility.
Unpack those a little. Oh, what did he say? He said ascribed worth now.
Oh.
Both profound.
Yeah, that's very profound.
What's yours? So attention, adoration, and humility.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that memory. I know.
Great stuff.
After this week.
Surprised there's any room left in the brain.
Running low. Explain some of those, if you can, or if you will.
There's a lot about attentiveness in the monastic tradition. Stillness and silence. But primarily stillness and silence of the heart. External stillness and silence really help. But stillness and silence of the heart can be achieved even in a busy place. It's just harder. And it's about trying to still all the habitual and obsessive voices in your head, essentially, that turn things over and over in an unproductive way, and that block out your awareness of God. And your awareness of reality, really. This is all about, coming to God is all about coming to reality. God is the ultimate reality. And we are full of illusions most of the time. My ideas about who I am, my projections onto the world, and onto other people, defining them in certain ways, having certain expectations of them, and defining myself and restricting myself and having certain expectations. There's a lot of illusion in our lives, and when we pray, we ask the Holy Spirit to still all of that and to get it out of the way. And we work hard to do that. We use meditative techniques to try to do that, to notice your thoughts and then let them go and return to prayer. Yeah, and it's about there's a sort of paradox in that, in a way, your attention goes into it goes inside, but not into your ego. So you kind of go through yourself, but into God. Your attention is on God. And when you put your attention on God, God puts his attention on you. Well, God's attention is on you already. It's only us that don't realise that. So once we put our attention on God and ask the Holy Spirit to help us to just let those thoughts settle and get out of the way, then we notice God's attention on us, and we notice that God's attention is God's creative energy. God's attention is what creates me and what makes me truly me. And my ego and my obsessions get in the way of that, and they prevent me from being what God is creating me to be. And they prevent me from allowing other people to be who God is creating them to be. So that's attention in prayer. What was the second one? Adoration.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, it comes out of the same thing, really. There's a lovely story that Timothy Ware, who became Metropolitan Callistos Ware when he converted to Orthodoxy, tells, or told, he's dead now, but not very long ago. He told a lovely story that's sort of in the Orthodox tradition, about somebody spending hours and hours in prayer in church every day, and the locals asking him, what do you do when you're praying? What do you say? And he said, I don't say anything really. I sit there and look at God, and God sits there and looks at me. And I thought that was a really lovely definition of prayer. So that's both attention and adoration, I think. The adoration is looking at God adoringly. And I think, again, the stiller we become and the less bothered by our illusions we are, the more that adoration for God just wells up within us. When we come to God, we can't help but love God. If we had the slightest inkling of who God really is, we would not be able to do anything else but adore him. So the more we can get out of the way of our ability to see that, the more we will just adore God by our very nature, because it's what we're created for. And it helps to use words and pictures and music to help us into that, to inspire us to adore God. But those external things are really drawing out what is deepest within us and what is truest to our created nature. And prayer can often become wordless or ecstatic, or at that point, but adoration doesn't have to be anything loud or hugely obviously expressive. We don't have to be obviously expressing great emotion in order to be adoring. We might do that, we might well do that, but that doesn't have to be the case. Adoration is when that spark of your truly created divine life is ignited in you, and it responds to God and it adores God. And what was the third one?
Humility.
Someone's paying attention. Thank goodness. Humility. There's a writer called Michael Casey, who is an Australian Cistercian monk, who wrote a book called Truthful Living, which defines humility as truthfulness and pride as falsehood. In fact, he defines pride as radical falsehood. Again, this idea of coming to reality, the reality of God, and therefore the reality of myself and the world. The closer we come to reality, the more humble we become, because humility is simply, again, that getting rid of ego illusions about I am something, I have to pretend I'm something great or imagine I'm something great. You don't have to do that with God. God only wants you to be real and only wants you to be you. You can't impress God. And so humility is not about doing yourself down at all, or about bowing and scraping, or it's not about low self-esteem, but it is about egolessness, and it's freedom. Humility is total freedom, because it's that freedom from that self-critical voice that says I have to make myself into something impressive and important in order to be valid. God does not give us that voice. God does not require that from us. God creates us in love, and that is our value, and it is inalienable. That cannot be done away with. So the invitation to humility, is the invitation to realise your total and indestructible value in God's eyes, and therefore the lack of necessity to pretend.
Yeah,
and I think prayer takes us there.
definitely. Who's your favourite monk ever?
Favourite monk
Out of all of them?
ever, of all the monks?
Considering all your brothers might be watching this.
I could just go through the list of the 13 other brethren at CR and say it's them, but I'd be lying. No, they're great, but favourites ever, well, can I do a short list of St. John of the Cross, because he was that early inspiration, and when it comes to poetic contemplative prayer, I just think he's unbeatable, really. Also Thomas Merton. It's a fairly obvious choice, but
It's a solid choice.
it's a solid choice.
Yeah.
Again, pretty hard to beat. You'd beat
Spectacular death.
spectacular death. Any monk who gets
Electrocuted in the
electrocuted in the shower in a hotel room in Bangkok.
It's quite the story.
It's quite a story. It's
probably the most showbiz death out of any of them.
Really showbiz death. Yeah. Because it's a hotel room in Bangkok, it
Makes it
just
worse.
automatically sounds really dodgy. It is not. It's nothing like that. He just was in Bangkok. He went to the Far East a lot.
Interfaith conference.
Interfaith conferences, and he worked loads with Buddhism in particular, and Zen especially. He's just far and away the most influential and just brilliant monk of the 20th century. His writings about contemplation are really illuminating, as well as really readable. And his autobiographical stuff, The Seven-Storey Mountain, is really compelling. He was just a brilliant mind. And an extraordinary person. I mean, he, again, sort of myth-busting about monks, he said that to be a hermit, which was what he was, essentially, he was a member of the Gethsemane Trappist community, but he lived as a hermit. He lived in community for a long time, and then he became a hermit, which is how St. Benedict says it really has to be done. That to be to do hermit life well, it has to come out of a really solid grounding in community. It can't just be because you're antisocial and you don't want to be with people. And Merton really embodies that. He was an extrovert, and he said you have to be an extrovert to be a hermit, which is a real surprise. You assume that the contemplative life, and especially the solitary life, is about being introvert. I dare say plenty are. Certainly plenty of monks and nuns are introverts. In fact, at CR, sometime before I joined, but they all did the Myers-Briggs test, and they were all introverts, and that's no surprise. But there's a couple there now who I would say aren't, who are more extrovert. But yeah, Merton was pretty adamant that in order to live hermit life well and not go nuts and not just... I think his point was that if you're already an introvert and you take up the solitary life, there's a real strong temptation just to become self-involved and just cut off from the world. And he says, and this is nothing new to Merton. You know, the tradition of hermit life is not about being cut off from the world. It's about intercession for the world. It's a deeply connected life, paradoxically. It's a withdrawal in order to have the space to connect on a prayer level with the world. And yeah, he was a hermit who travelled the world. And when you can hear recordings of him teaching and giving lectures and stuff, and he's really energetic and charismatic and verbose, and I think he was really hard to live with. His brothers at Gethsemane said that he was really hard to live with because he was just so driven. Somebody said that he had the energy of 3 men, and he really did. So let's go John of the Cross, Thomas Merton, and I'm really enjoying Michael Casey at the moment, but I don't know if I could quite put him on a level with those two. No. But hey, we'll stick him in there.
There you go. You could have said Bede, but...
I could have said Bede, or I probably should say St Benedict, really, because
Bede's the main man.
Community is Benedictine. But yeah, it's Bede's here.
It's the wrong Benedict here, though, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's another Benedict. Different Benedict.
Not the same one.
An excellent Benedict.
Yeah. It's a number of Benedicts.
Excellent Benedict. There are a number of Benedicts, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, this year, well, this month, Bede has become at least my temporary favourite. Researching about him in order to speak about him yesterday. He's just a delight, and his writings are delightful. They're just so full of warmth. His histories are, he adores what he's writing about, and and he's a brilliant writer.
So we've got John of the Cross, Thomas Merton, Brother Casey, and an edition of Bede just for a month.
A little, temporary edition.
A month-long Bede subscription.
That's right.
Just bringing things maybe to that, because these conversations are meant to focus on worship and prayer, and I think you've done that so far brilliantly, without me having to ask you, which is wonderful. If you had to pick a Bible verse that was your favourite, it was the go-to. I flick through my Bible, not John 3:16, but I flick through, because that's everyone's cop-out. Flick through, and that's the bit that I take comfort in.
That's the one I take comfort
in. Or story, maybe, or it could be a whole book of the Bible like that. What's your bit?
I think it's probably Psalm, is it 139? I'm terrible with the numbers. I'm rubbish at Bible references. I always go, that bit where it talks about but I never know what the reference is. The one that begins, Lord, you have searched me out and you know me. You know my lying down and my rising up. You know every word that's... What is it? Every thought that's in my heart before it reaches my lips, or something like that.
Yeah.
Like I say, terrible at Bible quoting, but that's a real go-to.
And for an actor, you should have learnt your learning lines. Anyway, sorry.
Because I think simply accepting that I am valid because God knows me, and that is it. And that is all that's required. That's just a big journey for me. And for a lot of people, I'm sure. And I just think that psalm, it takes me to a centered place very quickly. And the verses later on about, if I go up into the heavens, you're there. If I go down into the depths of Sheol, you are there. If I think the darkness will cover me, darkness is not dark to you. There is
Okay.
nowhere that God is not.
Huh.
Nowhere. And that is a lesson that I find I have to and want to learn and relearn and relearn and relearn all the time. And I think we all do, really. We're all tempted to think this is a place where God isn't. You know, for now I won't be present to God, or in this place I don't trust him, or you know, I think I have to do this on my own mettle, or because I've done this I'm not acceptable to God, or I'm not in the right state to pray, or you know, all sorts of things, or I'm not as valid as that person, or you know, we all play these games with ourselves. And I think that psalm is a really good one for just taking us out of all of that and going, God is in you and you are in God wherever you are and whatever state you're in. God is always completely there. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, final question is the curveball one. Favourite childhood toy?
Did not expect that.
No.
Great. I'm gonna go with those old telephones, plastic telephone on a string. It's on wheels and it's on a string, and you can pull it along, and it's got the old-fashioned dial. It's red, old receiver style telephone. Who is it that makes those? Is it Fisher Price? It's a Fisher Price toy, and I loved it, and I just have such a vivid memory of ours. And I discovered recently that they're still making them, which I just think is astounding, because what child now recognises that as a telephone?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I love that is still a toy.
Brilliant.
There you go.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll see you out. And thank you all for watching. And this video will go up in June, and then hopefully there'll be a third one in July, and then we'll have to wait and see where we go from there. But thank you, Brother Jude. And if you haven't yet seen, there's loads of pictures of the 1350 service on the website, and some very good ones of Jude putting some funny faces, so go and check those out.
Thanks a lot. Cheers,
Bye.
Tim.